Ford with the first Taurus, Jackie Stewart, testing the car. They want to hear what Jackie has to say about how the new Taurus drives, and he gets out and he goes, "Listen to how shit these doors sound." He starts slamming the doors. "Look at this door handle. This doesn't feel right." And like no dynamic feedback whatsoever. And they paid him like whatever, $1 million to tell him the doors sound tinny.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Horsepower Heritage. I'm Maurice Merrick, and greetings to all of you listening from places like Villanova, Pennsylvania, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Irvine, California, Panjim, India, Melbourne, Australia, and Luton, England. Great to have you back again for another episode, and this one is sort of all over the map. From electric vehicles to supercars and classics, and all sorts of stuff in between. And that's because my guest today really gets around in the automotive world. Jonny Lieberman is a veteran automotive writer, and he's the senior features editor at Motortrend. He also co-hosts the Inevitable podcast, and he's a regular on Spike's Car Radio. So if you're an avid automotive podcast listener, I'm sure Jonny is no stranger to you. And we got to know each other a little bit over the summer, and Jonny said, "Have me on the podcast. I love podcasts." So a few weeks ago, I showed up at Casa de Lieberman in Los Angeles on a sunny Saturday afternoon, and we sat on Jonny's back patio and enjoyed some good cigars and banter about cars. And he was a great host, and we really had fun. So I hope you like this one too. And if you do, there's a few ways you can support the show. You can send a friend a link to the podcast, or while you're listening, take a screenshot of your podcast player and post it on your socials. You can even include a link there too. But that'll get more people listening to the show, which is always a big help. And if you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please leave me 5 stars and a quick review. I don't even care if it's just a thumbs up emoji. That's great. And I read all the comments and reviews. And at the end of the day, I depend on you guys to help get the word out. So all of that is much appreciated. Okay, stay tuned. It's Cars and Cigars with Jonny Lieberman of Motortrend. And that's coming up right after this. This episode of Horsepower Heritage is sponsored by Model Citizen Diecast. No matter what's in your garage, you can fit all your automotive heroes on a shelf. And they've got you covered, whether it's 1/43rd scale, 1/18th scale, or even the ginormous 1/8 scale masterpieces from the Amalgam Collection. Go to modelcitizendiecast.com and get 10% off when you use the promo code HERITAGE at checkout. Limitations apply. From race cars to street cars and everything in between, it's Model Citizen Diecast, because your inner child still wants to play with cars. What a beautiful afternoon. I'm just cutting my cigar here. You have been kind enough to provide us with cigars.
Well, there's 2 things I'm really snobby about in life. Well, actually, there's a lot more, but there's 2 I talk about publicly. And cigars and bourbon. And so Maurice had offered to bring cigars, and I was like, no. I will provide cigars. And what we are smoking, so there's a wonderful brand called Tatuaje, and most of my money I've ever spent on cigars has gone to Tatuaje, which means tattoo in Espanol. Friggin' delicious. It's I think the first cigar he's done, or first mainstream one, Pete Johnson, buddy of mine who owns Tatuaje, but it uses a Mexican San Andreas wrapper over Nicaragua filler and binder, and it's a big mother of a stick, but I think it's really good.
Well, it's very buttery. It's very mild. It's a perfect afternoon smoke. And by the way, today it's a hot fall day here in LA. You could probably hear the leaf blowers in the background because that's like a perpetual noise.
It is
in the city of Los Angeles.
Well, they're going electric, and I think they're passing an ordinance pretty soon that like you gotta use electric leaf blowers, which
right.
I would like, because there's no schedule for gardeners. They just kind of show up. That's right. We got neighbors. Their guy shows up like Thursdays. Our guy's Saturdays. So all kinds of noises. So yeah, I'm a big advocate of EV leaf blowers and lawnmowers.
There you go.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah, I hope you like the cigar.
Thank you. And the Mexican Coke. Very good.
Hey, man.
I love it.
Yeah. Welcome
Glass
to the
bottle.
East Side. Yeah.
Cheers, buddy.
Cheers. Absolutely.
Jonny, you're the senior features editor at Motortrend, and you've been there, 13 years at Motortrend?
A little over 13 years, yeah. Yeah, started in, I can't do math, but 2010, July of 2010. And yeah, still there. And
a lot of changes over that period.
Oh, massively. Yeah.
I mean, the web alone is just...
Motortrend, I will say, we had Angus McKenzie who kind of put together the modern Motortrend, and he was... he always called himself platform agnostic, which is a term I like, which is like, I don't care if they're reading us in a magazine, on a phone, on an iPad, as long as they're reading us.
Right.
Where a lot of people like double down on magazines. And I remember, I can't remember the year, but at one point, we asked everybody in the office, like under the age of 30, have you ever purchased a magazine? And it was like, no. Like, why would you purchase them? Where do you buy magazines? Like, they didn't even know. You know what I mean? So it's, it's a big change. It's a big change for sure. And, now we're basically like a phone company. You know what I mean? Like, I forget the number, but a huge percentage of our articles and videos and everything is just consumed through an iPhone. So it's, for now, that's the dominant medium. But, it can, like anything else, it can change. And that's, don't get too attached to technology because it changes instantly.
No, it's good that Motortrend and Angus has always been at the head of the curve. So
smart dude. Yeah, smart dude. And, and Ed, who's replaced him, also a smart dude. I mean, Ed early on.
This is Ed Lowe.
Ed Lowe, sorry. Ed Lowe early on really embraced, I would say, EVs in a way that the other big people, the people running big websites didn't. They saw them as like, it's funny, like, our competition's Car and Driver, and not to like single them out, but like, they're pushing save the manuals, and it's like, no. Transmissions are going away. Forget about manuals. There's no more gears.
Somebody should tell Ferrari. Because they don't build a manual anymore.
But you know what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you're saying.
If you look at the R&D budget, like we met at a Mercedes event, right? And I was at another one in Portugal like 6 months ago, and we were looking at the new Maybach EV. Their names are horrible right now, but
the Gargantuan or whatever it is.
The big Maybach that's electric, the SUV, the 4-seat monster. And Robert Lesnick, who's a designer for Mercedes, he was there, and I'm looking at the car for the first time, and I had a question. And he looks at me, he goes, God, he goes, I designed this like 6 years ago, man. I can't remember why I did that. And I go, so wait, so you've designed the 2029 Mercedes already? He's like, yeah, we just locked them like last week. Wow. And I go, are there any that are gas? No. So it's like people are like arguing over this as if like your really pithy internet comment about microwaving a steak is going to like shift 100 billion R&D dollars anywhere. So anyways, Ed was very savvy, took a lot of heat. Motortrend, like they're paying you to like talk about EVs, and I wish they were, but it's just like we're covering the industry, and the industry for a wide variety of reasons is going electric,
right?
And the U.S. will be 5 years behind the rest of the world, but like by 2045, except for like high end sports cars and maybe a couple truck applications, like there won't be internal combustion. It's gonna be gone.
You're covering the industry in the here and now.
Yeah.
Or, your bread and butter is the next big thing, right? The newest car. But now, let me ask you this, Jonny, because
please.
Not everyone is completely 100% focused on EV. For example, Toyota has the new ammonia engine.
Right.
Cummins has a hydrogen engine. Porsche with the synthetic fuels.
Yeah.
So
I'm glad you mentioned Porsche.
Let's talk about all this because, my point of view is that one size does not fit all. EVs are part of the puzzle.
Right. Well, let me back that up for a second. So, synthetic fuels. Okay, what and we just actually had on my other podcast, The Inevitable, we had Carl Dumbs. That's an unfortunate name, but he's the head of Porsche's e-fuel program. Right?
And by the way, let me just interrupt and let listeners know that The Inevitable is a Motortrend podcast, and basically you're looking at the future of mobility, and it's co-hosted by you and Ed Lowe.
Yeah, and every week we just talk like
a very interesting show, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, we like the one coming out today. We had the guy. I'm blanking on his name. Anyways, he's in charge of the electric Porsche that's going to become the Cayman. So we had him on to talk about their I think it's called the Cayman E-Performance or 718 E-Performance. We interviewed a guy that is a brand manager for an e-bike company. We had this guy Carl on, who's in charge of Porsche's e-fuel program. We had a guy from Nikola Trucks on, who's doing hydrogen semi-trucks. So we just, what are cars going to look like? Our tagline is, where are we going and how are we going to get there? Meaning, like, what will we be driving?
Oliver Schwab.
Yes, Oliver. Yeah, Oliver. And there was a guy, Ed from Michelin.
Michelin, right?
Yeah.
Talking about a sustainable tire.
Yeah, so that's becoming. It might turn out that like all this microplastic in the ocean that's poisoning all life on Earth, 100% of it might come from tires, which sucks. So that's a real emerging crisis, which the science is just getting its arms around. But e-fuels, okay. So what's interesting about them is that under a microscope, Porsche's synthetic gas to a scientist would look like gasoline.
Right, the molecule looks the same.
Yeah, it's the same hydrocarbon.
Right.
Well, no, wait a second. If you burn that, don't you release CO2? Yes, but it's not CO2 that's underground that we're pulling up and releasing. They're taking existing CO2, mixing it with hydrogen, and that becomes methanol, I believe. And then in the 70s, I think Exxon developed a technique called methanol to gas, or MTG, methanol to gasoline. And so then you can literally turn methanol into gasoline or diesel fuel or whatever you need, or even actually a better type of gasoline, which I don't know where that will go, but it is possible. So I drove the first ever Porsche, and June 8th, 1948. It was registered in Gmund, actually in Switzerland. It was sold from Gmund, registered in Switzerland, with a tank of e-fuel. And it felt just like a car. And so this is good. So this is a good thing. Now, it's a tricky thing because it's like, well, wait a second. Where does this electricity come from that is mixing hydrogen and carbon dioxide into methanol, and then that conversion process from methanol into gasoline? Okay, well, right now their lab is in Patagonia. It's in Chile, way down south, where they have endless wind. Endless wind.
Okay.
Endless wind. And no humans.
Right.
So there's no way to, capture this wind energy and do anything with it, but you could liquefy it. And if you liquefy it, you turn it into gasoline, and then you got to put it on a boat and move it somewhere. Now, why is Porsche doing this? Because Porsche has announced that, with the exception of the 911, all of their products will be electric. And they're doing this because currently there's 1.3 to 1.4 billion automobiles on planet Earth, and while you may not be able to buy a new one within our lifetime, the 1.4 billion that exist aren't going anywhere. So, if you can make the gas that is still being burned, if you can make that cleaner, I don't want to say cleaner. The NOx is exactly the same. Clean is one of those weird, like we were just talking with JPL today about a scientist that's going to come on the show. And they're like, do you want someone who's an expert in NOx, or do you want someone who's an expert in carbon? And we're like, carbon dioxide. We want to talk about carbon. Because this synthetic fuel is just as dirty coming out of the tailpipe as regular fuel in terms of NOx. Its only advantage is it's just recycling existing CO2. It's not introducing new CO2.
Right.
Now, will you ever be able to pull up to a Porsche gas station and buy a tank of 100% synthetic? No, probably not. What they're going to do is, like ethanol, just mix it into existing gasoline. So it'll help alleviate the problem, but it's not going to solve the problem of, putting more CO2 into the atmosphere. The best hope for that is electrification, and then creating the batteries with green energy, charging the cars with green energy, decarbonizing transportation has to be the end goal, or humanity will suffer because the planet will become unhospitable to our species. Another species will pop up. The cockroaches they'll love whatever we leave for them. But we want our children and grandchildren and their grandchildren to be able to live long, happy, healthy lives.
Now, all of this aside, Johnny, what's exciting to you about electric vehicles? Because, we both know that 95% of humanity doesn't care in the way that we do about cars. They're not enthusiasts. They just want to get from point A to point B.
Right. So that's the easiest switch of all, right? Maurice, you're wearing a Shelby on your shirt. So
Yes.
I was giving a talk at the Peterson one time. I was on a panel. I wasn't giving a talk. I was on a panel. They're asking questions. There was a guy in a Shelby jacket, and he's like, EV bad, whatever he said. And I said, sir, I go, will you lose any sleep if tomorrow all the RAV4s were electric instead of gas? No. Oh, who cares about RAV4s? What about the Camrys? No, I wouldn't care. Civics, Accords, no. So, good, boom, easy. It doesn't have to be exciting.
Right.
Now, for the consumer, okay, imagine you bought your Corolla because, you did this weird calculus in your head is like, to me, buying a car is like buying a refrigerator. I just want it to work. I don't want it to break. My dad told me Toyotas are reliable. I bought a Toyota. So imagine suddenly you buy a car that's in the same price point and it's twice as fast or maybe even 3 times as fast. It costs you a quarter to run. So in other words, instead of paying, $5 a gallon for gas, which I was just in Arizona, which doesn't have California prices, and it was $5 a gallon in Arizona. It costs you like $15 to fully charge your vehicle, right? And then here's the part where if you've never owned an EV, you don't totally get this. But imagine waking up and your software's been updated, just like with your phone, and your car's better. It goes further on a charge. It rides better. It has new features. They've just improved the vehicle, which they're able to do. You know what I mean? So you never have to get an oil change. You never have to. Nothing's going to break. If something does break, you unplug it and you plug in a new part. It's not like you have to disassemble the engine. And there's liquid and valves and chains and all this. It's really easy to fix EVs. So for 95% of the population, awesome. EVs are, I think, a no-brainer. Got to get the cost down a little bit, but that's coming. That's the next. We're kind of in like the bottom of the first, top of the second in terms of the electrification of the automobile.
Right.
All right. For enthusiasts, well, now it's kind of no man's land. So, I've driven stuff like the Lucid Air, and I briefly got to drive a prototype of the Sapphire. And
the Lucid Air, was that not Motortrend's car of the year?
It was our car of the year before. 2000 was our 2022 car of the year.
Okay.
Yeah. Now that's, I've driven every flavor of that. Remarkable car. Handles better than a Taycan. The new Sapphire, the 3-motor, 1,200 and some odd horsepower version, almost to a man or woman, the people that drove it have been like, this is literally the best driving sedan in the history of the world. This is better than the M5 CS. Okay, that's cool. I'm looking forward to that because they're able to use, really, for the first time, they're really taking advantage of what electric motors can do. Meaning, as you begin to turn left, you can overdrive the right outside wheel and literally brake the left inside wheel and literally spin it backwards with, regen braking. You apply that, you tell that motor, go the other way. And, you read the reviews, any review. My old frenemy, Camisa, Camisa says...
Frenemy.
Yeah. Best handling car he's ever driven, I think was his conclusion, Yeah. So that's, okay, so as an enthusiast, that excites me. Also, I did a launch in one, and it does a quarter mile in 9 seconds, and it does the half mile in 14.3 seconds at 187 miles an hour, and I hit 198 because I ran out of runway in a blink of a eye. Pardon my French. That's exciting to me too. And
did you have a change of shorts?
No, but I was surprised. How I should say this. I was running the Lucid Air Grand Touring Performance GTP. That's like 1,000 horsepower, 1,050 horsepower, and that does a quarter mile. I should say, does a quarter mile over and over and over again in 10 seconds, 10.0. We actually did it 10 times in a row just because there's that myth out there that EVs can only do it once.
Right.
So we did it 10 times in a row, and our times were 10 flat, 10 flat, 10 flat, 10 flat, then 5 10.1s in a row, and then a 10.2 on the 10th one. And we had a Porsche Turbo S that we did the same thing to, which had more variance and was slower. So the Porsche was going from... I think its best run was 10.2, which was the Lucid's worst, and it was going as high, I think, 10.5 on the 10th. So it was, it was varying more, and it was not as consistent as the EV. Okay, 2-door sports car. I don't know. This is where I don't have a good answer. So the question though becomes for enthusiasts, okay, 2-door sports cars, how are you going to replace a GT3? with EV. I don't know. I'm very curious to see how this new electric Cayman is gonna go. Porsche the other day said, "Hey, when it comes to weight versus range, we're choosing lightweight over range. We're not in it to win the long distance thing." Batteries, I believe, are really in like their infancy, and I think everyone agrees with this. But like Toyota, for instance, has said by 2025 they'll have a solid state battery, which will weigh way less than a liquid state, like half the weight we're talking, and will have a 900 mile range. So if that comes out, then you'll have a chance where EVs suddenly, they will hopefully be able to have the same kind of weights. Haven't seen it yet. The other thing is, what are we worried about? Why are we doing this? Well, we got to get carbon out of the atmosphere. Okay, well, stuff that really that enthusiasts buy, supercars and so the GT3, it's a naturally aspirated flat six. A lot of cool V12 stuff is out there, right? Well, how many of them sell? Well, globally, I don't know, 25,000 12-cylinder engines globally a year.
Right.
Well, how much CO2 do they put out? About none. So maybe V12s never go away. And the people that can afford $500,000, million, $4 million cars, they can keep buying V12s because it doesn't affect me or you really an iota. Like with the Aston Martin Valkyrie, the emissions testing, the equipment they use to emissions test the Cosworth V12 released more CO2 than all 250 Valkyrie engines will release over their lifetime, just to make sure that they didn't release too much CO2. You know what I mean? You're talking, it's just globally a drop in the CO2 bucket. So I think for, people worried about that, I think Porsche, I don't know the number of GT3s they make a year, but it's, it's not a lot. The 911 will probably, we know that the 99 2.2 is going to become a hybrid. Porsche has said that every other vehicle they make will be electric. So, if the GT3 alone continues to be naturally aspirated, I don't think in terms of CO2 that's a big deal. Globally, but it's it's the 2.5 million full-size trucks that are sold in the U.S. and the RAV4s that are sold. Those are the ones that really have an effect in terms of CO2. So, it's hard if you've never spent a lot of time with or owned an EV, I have a Rivian, and it's really hard to explain what a wonderful thing it is. What I've been saying lately is, when I went up to Rennsport, I drove it up there for a variety of reasons, and I told my wife, hey, I'm taking the Rivian. She's like, oh no, for the whole week? And I go, what? You drive the Alfa Romeo, you got a Giulia. She's like, yeah, but I like the way the Rivian drives, and it's just it's just a better driving experience for most of the people most of the time. Now, is it real loud? Does it go vroom, vroom, vroom? It doesn't go vroom, vroom, vroom.
It doesn't feel truck-like either, does it?
It can, but that one, I mean, the ride and handling of that is they had the guy from McLaren come over.
Right.
You should use McLaren dampers.
That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah. No, but I meant EVs in general. They're never going to go vroom, vroom, vroom.
Oh, yes.
And there's a lot of people I need noise. There's no answer for that. It's not going to sound like a Ferrari V12. Nothing will. And hey, you know what? Every car you own that isn't a Ferrari V12 also doesn't sound like a Ferrari V12. One way you can feel about it is, when you burn gasoline, 20% of what you're burning, the power, goes to forward momentum, and the other 80% is lost to heat and noise. So that's
why we've got brake horsepower and wheel horsepower.
Well, but that vroom vroom vroom, that's just the sound of your dollars going up in smoke, literally. So I don't know, but yeah. So for the real enthusiasts, EVs are going to be a challenge, and they're being held to an incredible standard. We're just getting started. I'd be very sad if there's no more V12s. But if the 2-liter turbo engine went away completely, I'd be fine.
Johnny, who's going to build the last internal combustion powered sports car?
Ferrari and Lamborghini.
I think it's going to be Porsche.
Or it could be Porsche. Yeah, could be Porsche. Yeah, they're all up there. They're all in it together. But remember, Most of them are going to be electric. You're going to start seeing electric Ferraris. There are
Sure.
Lamborghini showed an electric Lamborghini. The V12, that's the one where it's like they're so expensive. Like an Aventador or whatever the new one is, the scrambled eggs thing. I don't know if they've announced the price, but the Aventador base price when new was $500,000. The 812 Superfast is like $400,000. And whatever replaces it will be more. The F12 Competizione was, I think, $750,000. The SP3 Monza was $2 million or $1.9 million. A Bugatti base price is now $3 million. That Zenvo thing, the new V12, which they're going to make, I think, either 100 total or 200 total of. That's $3 million. Like the Aston Martin Valkyrie, a bargain at $2 million.
Do you like supercars?
I love supercars.
I mean, kind of a silly question, right?
I love, yeah. I'm all about supercars. I love them.
What's your favorite? You drove a Chiron recently, yeah?
I'm lucky. I've driven a number of Chirons, but I recently hit 245 miles an hour in a Chiron, which I consider a total failure because I was trying to hit 250, and I was apparently getting buffeted by crosswinds. It didn't happen.
Where was this?
Cape Canaveral runway in Florida, the space shuttle runway.
Sure.
Yeah. That was disappointing. And then a week later, I was like, yeah, that was pretty cool. 245 is pretty good. That's good. That was a Chiron Super Sport of the Chirons, and could be my favorite supercar, or hypercar, really, the Pure Sport. The Chiron Pure Sport is unbelievable. It's like the GT3 version of the Chiron. Massive camber, shorter gears, so like its top speed is only 220 or whatever it is. But the acceleration is way quicker because of the shorter gearing, much more usable gears, improved aero for kind of like racetrack downforce stuff. And that was, I drove that back to back with a Chiron Sport, and it was a big, big difference. Honestly, my favorite, and it's probably one of the worst cars I've ever driven, but I've driven several of them now, but like the Lamborghini Countach, to me, that's like the high water mark of it just looks like it comes from another planet, and Diablos are super cool. I love a good Diablo SV specifically, but man, the Countach is because that's the thing about supercars, yes, I'm very lucky I get to drive them. I probably drive them, as much as the owners, because I know a lot of supercar owners. The cars kind of sit,
Right.
So it's they're not, I should say the last decade supercars have become wonderful, but they were never that great to drive, or at least they weren't quick by modern standards. When you compare a Diablo SV to like a modern car, it's great not because of its performance, because it's a WRX would keep up with it. But it's just great, the experience of it, the sound of the engine, which isn't loud. It's just a really nice sound. Mm-hmm. The way it feels, the view out, but then also getting out of the car and looking at it is I think the biggest reward of good supercar ownership. And that's why design matters so much. Modern ones, that Pure Sport's hard to beat. And then I drove the Aston Martin Valkyrie, which is just, I think, the most amazing design since either the Countach or the Vector W8. An extreme car. I'd like to drive it on the street. I only drove it on a racetrack. Ridiculous. It's a 6.5 liter V12 that spins to 11,100 or something. It makes 1,000 horsepower just on the V12, plus a hybrid assist. So there's torque fill between gear changes.
Explain that.
Well, when you change gears, right? You disconnect the clutch, or you disconnect the engine from the transmission for a split second,
right?
But the car cannot go forward while that's happening unless you have an electric motor that's powering the transmission that keeps the transmission spinning,
right?
It keeps torque on the transmission, and this thing's so wild I can't even explain it. What that motor is capable of doing. Because not only does it do torque fill, but then as the gears are engaging, because they're dog cut gears, no synchros, the electric motor then accelerates the receiving gear to the speed of the engine.
Right. It's like an electric synchro.
It's an electric synchro. So it's doing torque fill, but then just as the clutch is re-engaging, it then spins the transmission up to the proper speed to match the engine. It's insane.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Totally insane. But that's a funny car because puff my cigar hand.
These are great, by the way. And I got to tell you, most of the time, halfway through a cigar, I'm kind of done. But no, I can keep going on this one. It's good.
I mean, again, most cigars don't taste very good. So
right, that's what I'm saying. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So the thing with the Valkyrie, because I think we're so beaten up with marketing BS, the whole time, they're like, hey, Adrian Newey is designing this car because we're making an F1 car for the street. And I was like, yeah, F1 car for the street. But nope, they made a 2-seat F1 car for the street. I mean, it's just an extreme, brutal experience. They were targeting their internal decibel number they're trying to get to was 110 decibels, which is like, louder than a rock concert. And I sound like an old boomer saying rock concert, but like, if you go see, Metallica,
AC/DC,
they're probably at like 108 decibels. 110 is very extreme. They couldn't get there. It's way louder. It's probably 126 decibels, I believe, inside. So you have to either wear a helmet or, if you're just going down to your Cars and Coffee, you got to wear noise-canceling earphones. And I was like, do you really have to? And we're driving around doing a photo shoot at like 4,000 RPM, and I took one ear off, and it's like deafening. It's so loud inside.
And what you really want is a calm system with headphones and a noise attenuating microphone, so you can talk to your passenger.
You can't talk to your passenger. I mean, you have that. It has a microphone.
Okay,
yeah, it has that. Yeah, it has that. That's how the stereo is through the headphones. Your phone, your Bluetooth is through the headphones. Everything. There's a little mic sticking out, but you have to wear it. It's that extreme of a car. But I mean, the performance is, it's ridiculous. It's F1. I mean, yeah, it's not quite F1 because of tires.
Right. I was just going to say, tires are the one thing that you can't translate to the street, from the track to the street.
You could put slicks on it,
but how long are they going to last?
They're not, and like God, you really, unless you live in like Scottsdale, like boy, you probably don't want slicks on a street car.
Yeah,
for a lot of reasons.
Yeah,
one being if you hit like a micron of water, suddenly you're on black ice. That's right. The big problem with slicks. But yeah, I mean, it's just extreme performance. And so I wish it was more fun. Like, I think that's one thing that Newey would never bring into the design considerations of a car is like, oh, it should be fun to drive. He's like, no, like, you just wouldn't even cross his mind. And like the lengths gone to on this car. Actually, I wrote a story that's on Motortrend somewhere about just like the extremeness of the car. For instance, the titanium bolts that hold the V12 to the tub. So every bolt on the car, obviously they're British, every bolt is metric, except for the 4 titanium bolts that hold the engine to the tub and the transmission to the engine. The 8 of them are imperial, because Newey knew that at that length and that thickness, the metric threading was 1 gram heavier than the imperial threading. So it saves 8 grams to have 8 imperial bolts. And when I said, that's ridiculous, they looked at me straight-faced, Aston Martin, and said, well, 1,000 grams, that's a kilogram.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, well, when you put it like that.
Right, it's cumulative.
Yeah, so this car is like the badge, for instance. So every Aston Martin, except for one, has had the wing badge on the hood. And a trivia question, I forget what it is, but trivia question, there's one that didn't have it. And Newey said, absolutely not. You're not putting a big steel thing that's going to ruin airflow, add 100 grams, that does nothing. You're not going to put that. And they said, no, it has to have a metal badge. That's Aston Martin. You're designing, I know you don't think you are, Mr. Newey, but you are designing an Aston Martin.
It's tradition.
And so their solution was they came up with it's still steel, I believe. It's like 3 microns thick. It's 99.7% lighter than the regular Aston Martin badge. Before it's put on, it has to be kept in a refrigerator because heat could warp it. And it's glued on and then clear coated over so it doesn't interfere with the airflow. Right. But that's the lengths, like the windshield wiper. They had to have a windshield wiper that could work at 217 miles an hour and meet Newey's wild aerodynamic goals. And you only could have one because 2 is too heavy and it's 2 motors and it's too much weight. So they finally reached out to the Canadian company, I believe it was, that made the arm for the space shuttle. So they were
Sure.
the ones. So they spent 2 years or something working on a windshield wiper.
The payload arm.
Yeah. And like who's driving their Valkyrie in the rain? Like nobody. But you can't sell it without a windshield wiper. So it's just the most extreme car ever made. I don't think anyone will ever. It's peak automobile. Except no. I should say Red Bull knew he's doing a passenger car for Red Bull. Track only, so it might even be more extreme because this has to have some creature comforts. I can't remember the Red Bull car. It's like RR25 or something. It's coming out soon. You'll see it. But track only, real similar in concept to the Valkyrie. But this, it's just such an extreme. There's a great book called A Wild Ride: The Making of the Aston Martin Valkyrie, and it's actually a 4-volume version of it. I have both. I have the 1 volume and the 4 volume, but it just it goes from when Newey, what's his face, the principal of Red Bull, Christian Horner,
Right.
Andy Palmer, and Simon Sproul, who was the PR guy for Aston. Went to a pub, got bangers and mash, drank a lot of warm lager, and I think Christian Horner was trying to keep Newey at Red Bull. Ferrari was courting him, and he said, "Well, I've always wanted to do a street car." So Aston said, "Okay," and he said, "My only request is that I have complete control over everything." And so the book chronicles that dinner to the actual car going on sale, and it's insane. Like it's literally an insane project.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, something like 5 million man hours just to get the prototype tub, not the tub in the production vehicles, but just to get a prototype tub. It was so complicated, much more complicated than an F1 car because you have not only do you have to do what Newey wants for like the best possible air management and flow and lightest weight, you got to have 2 people in it, and it's got to pass a couple crash tests and things like that. So it's just like insanity.
Jonny, you don't call yourself an automotive journalist.
No, journalists help humanity. They take on the man. I try and make the man more money. Really, I like to say I'm a car writer. I like telling stories about cars. I like saying, hey, I did this, and here's the experience, and here's what happened, and here's why it's important. But I break news when I can, but I'm not covering. I've said nothing about the strike. You know what I mean? I think an automotive journalist, emphasis on journalists, would be covering the strike. I'm not. I'm removed from it. I'm several layers removed from it. I review the final product. When we go on a press launch, and this has been covered to death, like they buy them nice steaks.
Yeah, shocker.
And it's like, well, Scion steaks are actually better than Mercedes steaks sometimes. So but yeah, so I'm a storyteller. I'm good. I think I'm good at telling stories. I'm okay at writing, and I love cars. So I was able to merge that. But I have a lot of respect for actual journalists. And I just wouldn't consider what I do to be journalism. It's car storytelling.
My first guest on this show, when I launched, was our mutual friend Bassem Wasif. And I asked him this question too, but I'm curious, is it hard for you to be objective?
No, I don't think so. The hard part, you got to be professional, I think. So, Angus McKenzie, who we talked about briefly, one of my really important mentors in this business and a great friend, I remember he just said, hey, he goes, my philosophy is, I want to love every car and I'm disappointed when I don't. And he goes, there's a lot of people in this business, they want to hate everything and they're surprised when they don't get to. And that's fun. He goes, that's really fun to bash a car. But he goes, are you aware of what goes into making a car? Like the thousands upon thousands of human beings that they're doing their job, and if a car's bad, by all means say so, but just make sure whatever you write, if I'm sitting across the table at dinner with the CEO of that company, I can defend you without saying, that's just our opinion. He goes, make sure I can back up what you're saying. So yes, I think for me, having that mentality, it's pretty easy to be objective. Sometimes if I'm going to write a bad review, do I remember having drinks with the PR person? I'm like, yep. And I know I'm going to get the email from them like, dude, bro, how could you say that? But, any friendships I've lost over that didn't matter anyways, and I don't really think I've lost too many. And the other thing is, they know because they've been working on this car, the car companies, for 4 years. They're well aware of what they're putting out. You know what I mean? And they know, when you go to build a car, they know that they're launching either at the top of the segment, the middle of the segment, or God forbid, the bottom of the segment. They know, they benchmark everything. They have professional, test engineers that know every single thing. What I would suggest to everybody, if you can, there's a book. It came out, I think in the late 90s. It's called Car, the making of the second generation Ford Taurus. And I think it is the greatest insight into the car industry that exists. And it's just about how Ford, with the first Taurus, which became the best-selling car in the U.S., it actually unseated the Camry Accord double-headed monster and regained the sales mantle for a domestic company, was viewed internally by Ford as a complete failure because it was 6 months late and the chief engineer was fired. Even though he made a great car that sold, didn't matter. Ford's thing was it's got to be on budget, on time, and it wasn't. So the second gen, it was taken away from like a visionary, I forget the guy's name, the engineer, and given to like somebody else, and then like they were like, all right, we're going to benchmark the 90, I don't remember exactly if it was the Accord or the Camry, but we're going to benchmark the 92 Accord. Halfway through, the 94 Camry comes out, and it's better than everything we're benchmarking. Too late. We'll just launch in the middle. And it's like, well, no, the Taurus has got to be the best. That's the last one was best in segment and everything, except for wind noise. And
arguably, by the way, the Taurus saved the Ford Motor Company.
I don't think there's any argument. The Taurus and the Explorer.
Yeah. Explorer, absolutely, yeah.
In a different way, but yes, the Taurus was a massive runaway hit. But there's this wonderful part in the book because they embedded this because Ford just thought they're going to have another hit on their hands. We did it once, we'll do it again, and we'll be on time and on budget. And so they embedded this woman. Her name's Mary something, and she covered the whole. She had insider access for 4 years of development. And this book starts with Jackie Stewart testing the car, and they're all excited to hear what Jackie has to say. But he's on the track and the road course and the handling and the special surfaces, and they want to hear what Jackie has to say about how the new Taurus drives. And this is literally the preface to the book, and he gets out and he goes, listen to how shit these doors sound. He starts slamming the doors. Look at this door handle. This doesn't feel right. And no dynamic feedback whatsoever. And they paid him $1 million to tell him their doors sound tinny. And then it's just downhill from there. And then it ends their one thing they wanted was, I think the first Taurus had what are called sail mirrors. So the little triangle that's created by the A-pillar and the belt line. You can put mirrors there, or you can put them on a wing mirror that kind of pops off the body, and that's quieter. It's a lot quieter if you do that. And that's all they wanted, the team that was still around from the first generation to the second gen. They wanted those wing mirrors, man, because that was the only complaint. All the magazines they wrote about the Taurus was a lot of wind noise. And then the things in clay, they're in the advanced design studio underground or whatever it's called. And the execs and the accountants come in and they're looking at it. And this one accountant walks up to it, grabs the mirror off the little wing mount and shoves it into the sail portion. And he's like, that'll save 40 cents a car. Oh, and she writes collectively the entire engineering team, design team's hearts all broke at once.
That's what people don't understand about the sausage factory, right? And that's true, by the way, of most any industry that where there's a passion and enthusiasm behind it. The enthusiasts don't consider the dollars and cents. Designing and launching a new vehicle is over $1 billion now.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So the Lexus LS400, which is one of the most studied, incredible ground-up designs of all time, that engineering process. It was called F1 internally at Lexus. That was $1 billion in 1986 or whatever it was, or from 85 to 89, whatever the gestation period was, $1 billion. Today that would be 14 billion. And a new car now is in the billions. Now, however, EVs are going to make it much cheaper, and that's another reason. That's the thing. I'm glad you said sausage making. That's something that people don't get about EVs is man, this is great for the automobile companies because they're really in it to make money at the end of the day. They're a business. And so okay, well, right now we're in this cycle where a new car comes out, and then 4 years later you do a minor pretty major refresh, but you change a couple body panels. The engine makes a little bit more power, it makes a little bit better mileage. Interior's a little new, you get a bigger screen, but the bones of the car are the same. And then after 8 years, you launch the next one, right? The 11th gen Accord just came out. The 10th generation Accord was 8 years before that. Well, why are we on this 4-year cycle? Where does that come from? It comes from emissions. So every 4 years, emission standards tighten up. And so you gotta do all this engineering work. Well, hey, if the cars look the same, why would anybody be excited about the new car that gets 1% better mileage? All right, yeah, change a couple body panels, make it sexier. Facelift, right? So you look at and I'm verbatim stealing this from a guy whose name I'm forgetting, and I'm really sorry, but he used to work for Ford. Okay, well, you look at the 2012 Tesla Model S and the 2023 Tesla Model S, nothing's really changed, very little. EVs 100% pass all emission standards the second they come out. There's no emissions, so they're off that cycle. So maybe we'll take 5 years on this one. Maybe 6 years, and they're not being forced by a regulation to improve the car. So it's just you can spread the R&D dollars out. Does it work? Well, the Tesla Model Y is the best-selling car on planet Earth. Works pretty well,
It's funny to think that 50 years ago we were still on a annual cycle, at least in terms of the sheet metal. Mm-hmm. The platform may not have changed underneath.
Right.
The engine and transmission is substantially unchanged, but interior, exterior, full rework.
Because they were looking for how do you excite consumers,
exactly,
right? And then somebody figured out every 3 to 4 years is enough, actually. And remember too, cars sucked, right? If you bought a new car, it might only last a few years. People forget this. Cars were really bad.
150,000 miles, and it was beat.
Dude, do you remember when rolling over 100,000
was a big deal?
It was huge. Put 100,000 miles on the Buick. That's amazing. Now, cars go a lot longer, and people keep cars a lot longer. So you don't need to sell them a new car every year. It's just not as frequent of a thing. Every 4 years is about right. Leases 2 to 3 to 4 years.
The price of entry is astronomical now compared to what it was then as well.
Yeah, even adjusted for inflation, it's a lot. Yeah, I mean, in the last few years, cars have really shot up. And during the pandemic, I think the average price of a new car went from $39,000 in the U.S. to now it's about $48,000 and rising. So yeah, cars are very expensive, and it's a problem. And and that's another problem for EVs is that. If lithium is $100 a kilowatt hour, well, a 100 kilowatt hour battery pack is $10,000. So you have a sunk fixed cost of $10,000 just for the material inside the battery pack. So that's not counting the metal that encompasses it and the copper wiring that wires it all together and the liquid that cools it. So a battery pack it's a fixed cost. So. If you were to take a Cadillac Escalade, the reason that's so profitable is it's just a Silverado. You add $5,000 of additional, leather and back seats and better infotainment, and you sell it for $50,000 more. It's really profitable. But now the problem is this is why we need lighter batteries. But if you shrink the car, you really can't shrink the battery pack that much, and that cost is fixed. So that's the challenge right now for EVs. We need lower priced EVs because we don't want to have a situation where poor people are doing the bulk of the polluting. You don't want that. You want an equitable distribution of this stuff. It'll come. And again, I wish I knew a lot more about it, but I feel that solid state batteries are gonna cut either the weight in half or double the density of the battery. So you would go from having a 2,000 pound battery to a 1,000 pound battery. And if you get to 1,000 pounds, they can go about 300-400 miles. Well, an engine, transmission, gas tank, fans to cool it, all the stuff. It's about 1,000 pounds. So it's okay. Now we're talking. But that's why most EVs are about 1,000 pounds heavier than the gasoline equivalent. Although you look at Tesla, and I'm amazed by them because you look at a Model 3, which size of a 3 Series, 3,900 pounds. Well, what's a 3 Series weigh? 3,800 pounds. So they've done a really nice job of making them light. and they're safe. It's not like they're tin cans or anything. Like Teslas are very safe vehicles too. So hats off to them for that. Model 3 price point, it's never, there never was a $30,000 one like Musk promised repeatedly for years and years. But you can get them pretty cheap, and they're able to, because they're so profitable and they're making so much per unit, they were able to lower the price of the, Model 3 the other day by like 11 grand or whatever.
Johnny, I saw a headline this morning. Elon Musk said on an investor call, "We dug our own grave with the Cybertruck." Did you see this?
Yeah. Well, some of us in the know have been saying that for a long time, and it's what he's really talking about is stainless steel. A stainless steel body is a terrible idea. Paint hides a lot of imperfections. If you don't have paint, if the body's not literally perfect, and it's hard to manufacture perfection on an assembly line, it just looks bad and warped and everything. So yeah,
go with aluminum and anodize it,
or just paint the friggin' thing. Who cares?
I don't know. I love silver. For the record, I love the Cybertruck.
When it first came out, I thought it was the coolest looking thing. I was like, I love, I want there to be cars that diverse. And then the Rivian came out, and I'll tell you, I put a deposit down on the Cybertruck the night it came out, but then I put a deposit down on the Rivian, and then I was able to buy one over a year ago. Cybertruck is still not out. And when he said the second part of that dug our own grave was, it's not coming in 2024, like I said last year, even though he said it was coming in 2020 or 21 initially, it's coming in 2025. So yeah, they're moving the goalposts. But the thing is, with Tesla, like, they're so profitable, it doesn't hurt them. Like, if Ford couldn't put out a new F-150, they'd go out of business overnight. Chevy, if they didn't have a Silverado,
they just eat their lunch.
Yeah. So, it's. I think the Cybertruck is going to turn into a very expensive kind of plaything, kind of like the Hummer EV. Which, hey, I got no problem with the Hummer EV. It's awesome. But yeah, it's not going to be the $40,000 electric work truck that Musk had sort of promised. And does it have to be? No, I don't think it has to be at all. But yeah, I mean, the stainless steel construction. So there's a reason that no one's ever done that. I mean, DeLorean did it in a way, but that didn't end so well.
No,
yeah, they had other problems, but yeah, it was
a few.
Yeah. But again, with that design, the DeLorean design. The metal imperfections sort of worked, and it wasn't nearly as big as a Cybertruck. And, by not painting it, they thought they'd save all this money. With the Cybertruck, I mean, it's massive. It's basically the size of a full-size truck, and you have these huge flat panels. Well, guess what? It's got to really be flat, like, 0.05 microns flat, which is almost an impossible target to get to for, body stamping or however they're doing it. It's really difficult to do.
The other thing that people don't consider about that is that body sculpting and character lines and whatever you want to call it, variations in the metal stiffen the panel. You don't have that with the Cybertruck.
Yeah, although
there's underlying stiffening.
Yeah, but I think the grade of steel they're using is like essentially bulletproof. I mean, it's really solid steel. Which also is not the greatest idea for a car. You don't need it. It's like, cars are fine with the whatever 304, steel that's used or aluminum. They're just fine. No one's ever been like, God, I wish my car was more bulletproof, except for the people that buy a bulletproof car.
I would suspect, though, Johnny, that just all of the hype around the Cybertruck has sold a lot of Model S's, Model 3s, Model Ys.
Could be. Or a lot of Rivians,
Yeah,
and a lot of Lightnings for people that really wanted an electric truck.
True, true. Good point.
I have a couple friends that have Rivians that like tow horses around, and it's the great electric towing for horses is fantastic because there's no gear changing, so the horses aren't jostled around and they don't freak out. And it's really good for the animals. And Rivian was the first electric truck out, so they bought it. Turned out they liked the truck for other reasons, but. They would have, if the Cybertruck had been out, they would have bought it. And, I think, I'm not going to buy, even though it was a $100 deposit, which is kind of a joke anyways, but I'm not going to buy a Cybertruck. I might have had it when I bought my Rivian. If I was a choice between that and the Cybertruck, I might have gone with the Cybertruck, but it wasn't even a possibility. I bought mine in June of 22. So now it's October of 23, and he's saying there'll be a couple sold during 24, but really not full production until 25. Yeah. So, my truck will be 4 years old at that point. And look, a lot of these EV companies, look like money laundering, Chinese money laundering schemes from the outside, and I was convinced that's what Faraday was. But who knows? The ones that seem to be legit, Tesla, obviously, the most valuable car company the world's ever seen. Number one selling car on planet Earth, number one selling car in California. I mean, their accolades are undeniable. Rivian seems to be around for the long haul, and Lucid. They're not selling a ton of cars, but massive amounts of Saudi capital, and then they just opened up a factory in Saudi Arabia that employs a lot of people. So I think Saudis might just keep them afloat, but they're not going anywhere, and like their stock price doesn't really matter. And look, the Saudi royal family could buy back all the stock tonight if they felt like it, and it wouldn't affect them at all because they're trillionaires.
Have you had any experience with Canoo?
A little bit. That's one I really want to succeed. I just think they're so cool, especially the pickup truck.
Yeah.
Like the van kind of looks like some kind of hospital device, but the pickup truck is killer looking.
I've seen them testing the van in Southern California, and I really like it. It's got a sort of a Blade Runner or Fifth Element quality to it.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I really like that.
So what's cool about the Canoo is that it's virtual steering.
Right.
So like Tesla, Lucid, Rivian, all the new EVs, they got steering columns. So you got to have a driver in this particular spot because it's a steering column. Well, this is it's an electric steering. So you put the steering wheel wherever you want it. So the proportions are actually different on this thing. Unlike as fancy as or as futuristic as like the Lucid looks, it's still a car. This is almost like, boy, you could put the steering wheel anywhere. You technically could drive from the back seat. You move the wheel, and so and the throttle and brakes are electric too. You know what I mean? So it's you're kind of at like a simulator that moves around on its own. And yeah, they're I think they're really cool looking. A friend of mine, she was an engineer for them, and she left to do something else. Merritt Johnson, she says they're in good shape. And I think NASA is officially using Canoes to shuttle the astronauts to, from the Space Center to the launch platform. That's their first contract. And I think there's room in the world for Canoes. It's hard to get timely updates, like what the hell's going on, emails from them.
Sure.
You know what I mean? They're very like, well, let's go over our grand vision. It's like, we know about the grand vision. We want the granular details. Look over here, So I don't know what's going on.
You want a press car.
I'd love a press car. Yeah. I hope they succeed because I think it's cool. And another California EV company is cool.
Speaking of press cars, all the driving events that you do, all the launches, does it scratch your itch in the sense that now you don't feel like you have to own?
It definitely helps. I know exactly what you're saying. It definitely helps. Great question. Mostly, yes. Look, to be honest, there's certain times I shut my eyes at night and I dream about cars. And there's a couple that I'll never get out of my head. The Ferrari 296 GTB might be the best car ever made. I mean, honestly, it's just wildly wonderful. Shocking how good that thing is. The Porsche GT3 manual, the driving experience. I would love to have one, but if I need like I'm really I love off-roading. One of the reasons I got the Rivian, and I love like Chevy ZR2s, Colorado, Silverado heavy duty. I'm very interested, but I can call Chevy and say, hey, can I have one, and take it out for a week, and that itch is kind of scratched.
Sure.
Or I have a situation like what happened with my Alfa Romeo where I drove the Quadrifoglio a lot, and I was like, this is the best performance sedan there is. And then I drove the one I wound up buying, the 2-liter, and I never really did like a mountain road with it or a racetrack with it. But it looked a lot like the Quadrifoglio, and we put it in comparison tests where we're driving city streets and a little bit of canyon roads. And it was the best of the competitors. But I get it home, and after like a month, it's like, oh yeah, it's really not a Quadrifoglio, is it? Like that's a 5,500 RPM red line on a 2-liter turbo. It's really not, And so that I kind of tricked myself in a way where I somehow, subconsciously was like, yeah, you're getting that Quadrifoglio for less money. But I wasn't. I was getting the 2-liter turbo version, which is a fine car. We love it.
Does it feel a little bit tinny to you?
I wouldn't say tinny, but like, by being an Alpha customer, you're not getting the greatest infotainment. I knew that we came out of an Audi all-road. And my wife's first comment was like, this backup camera sucks. Like, I want the surround view for parking. And she has scratched all 4 wheels to death, without that camera. I wouldn't say tinny. I love the platform that's based on. The Giorgio platform, I think, is really solid.
The reason I asked, Johnny, is because I've driven a few Giulias, and the sound deadening is not quite up to like a Mercedes or BMW standard.
Right.
So that's what I immediately noticed. Now, having said that, the car is really fun to drive.
Yeah.
It handles really well. The steering is nice and snappy.
Yeah, for the same money, compared to like a C-Class or a 3 Series, the Alpha, to me, drives better. It's more fun to drive. It has a much worse back seat. We knew that going in. Our kid, when we got it, was like 2, so that really wasn't a thought. He's 6 now. There's still plenty of room for a 6-year-old back there. And again, the infotainment's not as good. We've been, very lucky. Totally reliable car. And again, we had the Audi, so it was not a totally reliable car. But yeah, I knew. I don't know. My wife had very little to do with the purchase decision, but like I knew going in what I was getting. What I wasn't ready for though was that like like all 2-liter turbo engines, this is pretty unremarkable. And it's if I had a Quadrifoglio, that would be a car I would like. Well, why would you ever get rid of it? It's delightful. Whereas this is like, if I'm just driving to the grocery store in it, it's an unremarkable vehicle.
It just does what you need it to do.
It's fine. It's just a car. But you know what? An Accord would have done the same thing. So yeah, that becomes a thing. Like I think my next purchase, I'm still mostly going to do this. It's probably the last gas car I'll ever purchase new, is the Toyota GR Corolla, because that thing kind of feels special, like just idling. Because it's a 1.5 liter engine that makes 300 horsepower. It's insane.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's just sitting there fizzing.
It's an angry bumblebee.
Yeah, and the handling is just so cool, and I just love the thing. So I think that's my next car and my last gas car.
Are you a long-term ownership kind of guy? I just tell you, I keep my cars for like 10 years. I have a Mini Cooper that's got 237,000 miles on it. My Daily, which is a 5 Series, has 152,000.
Right. No, not really. I tend to go through cars pretty quick. I for my business, I always lease a car. So the Alpha is the lease car. Now, the Rivian's purchased, assuming it keeps working the way it's been working, and I have no signs that that's going to change anytime soon. Like I can't think of a reason to get rid of it. Like,
yeah.
We're just like literally in love with that vehicle. Everyone in the family, the kid loves it. When I like pick him up in something that isn't the Rivian, like he'll be, oh Dad, I want the Rivian. He's a little kid, but I love it. So that one I'll probably hang on to for a good long while. Now the scary thing is like I have no idea what a used electric truck's resale value is going to be. So I might have to hang on to it for a long time.
Yeah, that's the big question, right?
Yeah.
I mean, because the technology is moving so fast, it's almost like with electronics.
Oh, yeah. And again, what's nice, though, about what we call software-defined vehicles is that you get these massive software updates, which really keeps the car fresh.
Yeah.
And again, as long as the mechanical parts hold up, like, and the interior has been holding up really well. It seems really well engineered just from material choices and stuff like that. I don't feel the need to replace it, so we'll see. But yeah, I mean, I know like with Nissan Leafs for a while, Nissan, because, I forget what they cost, like 38,000 or something for a Leaf. Used, they're worth like $5,000. So Nissan was running around buying them all so that they wouldn't hit the used market. And they were like, donate them to fire departments, donate them to schools, donate them to hospitals, donate them, just to keep them off the market. Because it was like, wait a second, why would I buy something for 38,000 that in 5 years is worth $5,000?
What's the resale value on your average Prius?
I don't know. Probably pretty high because they all wind up as taxis or Ubers.
By the way, it's funny to see all these beater Priuses now. I mean, I see some really...
Oh, yeah. And remember, the Prius was interesting, like, from a, engineering point of view, just because, like, all right, we're going to sacrifice everything about the car's character on the altar of efficiency. So it's just going to be efficient. So, like, it didn't have a rear suspension to start with. And then at, like, 100,000 miles, like, you've been in the back of an Uber Prius, like, it's horrible.
Yeah.
It's horrible. Actually, I will say, Uber and Lyft have really taught me that, like, most cars are horrible in the back seat in terms of ride quality. Like, that's something we never test for. I'll sit in the back seat while it's not moving. But, like, going to the airport in, like, a Kia Niro with 50,000 miles on it, like, oh, my God, it's horrible. It's awful.
The Prius practically makes the Honda Insight looks sexy.
Yeah. Although the new Prius, quite nice.
Yeah. The restyle is awesome.
Yeah, I haven't driven it, but I've heard very good things.
It actually has some style now.
It looks like a Lamborghini. I mean, they really...
It looks good.
They put the Urus front end on the Prius. It's like, all right, yeah. Raked windshield helps. Yeah, so I don't know what they're worth, but, but a lot of people want a cheap thing that gets 55 miles a gallon, so it's there it is. There's a used Prius. I'm taking a pause to relight the cigars here. And these are long smokes. These are big, fat, like 6.5 inch by 50 some ring gauge.
We've never spoken about Priuses before on this show, and that's probably the last time. So now that we've gotten that out of our system,
I have very little to say except that they ride terribly in the back seat. Yeah.
And for that matter, Johnny, I typically don't talk about new cars all that much. I'm not opposed to it. My lens is focused on classic stuff.
I'd rather talk about classic cars.
Well,
they're much more interesting.
And so that's what I want to transition now to. I want to segue to some classics because you've had an opportunity to drive some of the greats.
Yeah.
And I'm interested in your driving impressions.
I just drove the first Porsche, like literally the first one. Like that was pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Now that car that they brought to Rennsport Reunion is a recreation, right?
No, that's a misconception.
Really?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, the one that's sitting in the Peterson Museum right now is an exact body double of the car they brought to Rennsport. However, the car they brought to Rennsport was modified by the original owner, who was like a Swiss racer, and so the car was sold in 1948. They traded a Speedster for it in 1957, a 356 Speedster. They got the car back, and the guy heavily modified it, changed the body. He wanted it to look like a 550 Spider. He changed the engine, a whole bunch of stuff, and they didn't really know what to do with it. And in the 50s, there was no classic department, and there was it was just an old Porsche. But somebody at Porsche, the guy's last name was von Frankenberg, and he founded Christophus magazine. He was their PR guy. He said, we should have this, I don't know, and it just sat in a warehouse / museum.
He realized it was important.
Yeah. So, okay, well, nothing happened to it for years. And then for the 70th anniversary, Rennsport 6, they said, let's get it running, and let's honor the modifications that the owner did, because a lot of owners modify their Porsches. But we have the blueprints. Let's design a wooden buck, and we'll hand make a replica of this car. And the one that's at the Peterson is exactly, they think, what it looked like. And they have, I don't know if they have color photos. They have black and white photos. And somebody wrote down what the color was. So, the interior and the metal's correct colors. It doesn't have an engine. It's a pusher. The one I drove is the original car. Mid-engine. And it was very weird why the first 356 was mid-engine and every subsequent one. Number 2 that was bought by a lady, I can't remember her name, but that was a regular 356 as we know them. It was a Gammon car, obviously, but this one was mid-engine. For you could speculate as to why. I asked Wolfgang and Ferdy Porsche, and they didn't know. I think it was because they were before the war. Old Man Porsche and Ferry Porsche were trying to do the Type 74. It was like a mid-engine V10 thing. They never built it for very obvious historical reasons. And, they maybe just wanted to do a mid-engine car, and then they started kind of simultaneously developing them. And it turns out there's a lot of packaging problems with mid-engine cars, especially in a country like Germany and Austria. Post-war, economy's in shambles. You can kind of say a rear-engine car is like a people's car in a way, because, you get better packaging out of it. You can put stuff behind the rear seat. Mid-engine car is really like a wealthy nation's kind of toy. and so they didn't go with that design. But yeah, it was cool. I mean, it was a very interesting, weird piece of history to design. And it was funny because I said, like, what's it worth? And the first thing they said, because I love when car companies talk smack on other car companies. They go, well, unlike Mercedes, we don't sell our priceless jewels. Talking about the Uhlenhaut coupe.
Yes.
Now, you and I met our buddy.
You're thinking of Marcus Breitschwert.
Yes.
Yeah. Vice President at Mercedes-Benz Classic.
Executive Vice President at Mercedes.
Yes.
One of the 5 EVPs.
That's right.
Yes, Marcus. Sorry. What a guy, by the way.
Yeah.
Right?
Fantastic guy.
Right. What a gem.
True enthusiast. Yes.
But for a German, sense of humor.
Yes.
And he is great. And I asked him, like, why the hell would you sell that? He goes, well, we had 2. And he goes, and also, our corporate dictate is, or mandate is that, we want to have a program for underprivileged young people to get into engineering. So, well, where's the money going to come from to fund that in perpetuity? Well, if we sold a 130 million euro car, we could fund that program forever. And that's why they did it. And and the other thing is, it's going to a collector who has the means to keep it museum quality or better than museum quality. Like you were with us at the Keller Museum. That's much better than museum quality, right? So the car is going to have a long, happy life. When that guy passes on and his ancestors need cash, maybe they'll sell it back to Mercedes. No one saw the contract. No one even knows who the owner is. So maybe it's like this guy gets to own it for the remainder of his life, and then it goes back to Mercedes. You know what I mean? Who knows? I'm speculating there. But who knows what this Porsche is worth? I had one friend who's a professional car appraiser who's now proved to me to be totally useless. He goes, between 20 and 50 million. And I go, that's a big spread, And he goes, yeah, you're right. 35 to 70. I go, you're just not going to commit. He goes, no. And I talked to some other people. They said, yeah, 100 million's probably what the thing's worth, but they'll never sell it. So it's effectively priceless. But what I loved about Marcus, what he said, so you and I were on the drive, the Mercedes and Sonoma of the W06 chassis cars, and he gave a really great cocktail hour speech. Usually those are painful, but his was like, this is great. And he said the best thing. He goes, everyone talks about, they think about Mercedes Classic, they think about the gull wings. He goes, we were in business for like over 60 years before the Gullwing came out, almost 70 years. Like that's half our history. We have a whole other half. So Mercedes has been thinking about classic cars much longer than anybody else. And they have, they have a lot of weird stuff to deal with. The Mercedes Classic Centers in Fallbach, Germany. It's kind of like a suburb of Stuttgart. And they have the Holy Halls are there. And they have Hall 1, which is like passenger vehicles. And Hall 2, which I've been in, very cool. It's like racing cars. Then they have Hall 3, which no one's been in. And what's Hall 3? Nazi shit. And so they had to make the decision, like, okay, we're part of this horrible history. Our cars were, famously driven by the worst of the worst. The people on Earth right now that want to buy, like, Gehring's G5, they probably are buying it for the wrong reason, right? So we're going to get them all. Maybe in 100 years, like from a museum point of view, because Mercedes does run the best car museum in the world, maybe one day we could display them or do something with, who knows, but we're just going to warehouse them, get them off the market, keep them out of the other hands, we'll deal with it. So they really are sophisticated in the way they think about it. And I've been trying to get in there. I said, hey, you know how only Nixon could open China? Like only Lieberman can open Vault 3. And they said, you're very clever, but no, you're not. No one's ever seeing this stuff.
Nice try.
Yeah. And I will tell you, I was in Fallbach one time, and they have a workshop there that's their classic center, the original one. And there was a thing under a tarp, and it was a 6-wheeled military-looking vehicle from about 1940 or 44, something. And I was like lifting the little sheet, and like I got my hand smacked, and I was like, "Whose is it?" And the guy looks at me, he's like, "It's Gehring's." I was like, or Goebel. I can't remember what he said. I think it was Gehring's. I was like, oh, yeah.
That would make sense. He was a portly fellow. He needed a large vehicle.
They can go anywhere. The roads were pretty bad during the war and all that. So, it's an interesting history. Look, there's no one at Mercedes now anything to do with the Nazi Party. But it is a part of their history. And like, it's weird with cars. Do you destroy them? Like, I don't think you do, but like, do you want, I mean, like Hera had Hitler's car on display for years until Mercedes bought it when they disbanded the Hera collection. So yeah, I think they're smart and savvy and doing the right thing. And I think with the Uhlenhaut Coupe, which is one of the most remarkable vehicles of all time. I mean, look, that's the W196 SLR. Those were the Stirling Moss, Fangio era F1 cars and the Mille Miglia winners. And they made a street version. Rudy Uhlenhaut, who was the chief engineer of Mercedes-Benz at the time, made a unique going body, for whatever the word for two uniques is, of these cars. And he drove one as his personal car. So it's known as the Uhlenhaut Coupe. And really, it's a W196 Coupe, and they're awesome. And I've seen them at the museum for years now. And like, good, somebody wanted to buy it. It's as long as it eventually comes back, because I don't like the idea of that disappearing into a black hole forever.
Right.
And there still is one that you can go see at the museum, and they're identical. I think one has like a blue interior, and one has a red interior. I might be making that up, but I think one is like blue fabric, and I think that's the one they sold, and the red leather is the one they kept, or vice versa.
Yeah.
So, but yeah.
What other classics come to mind in terms of really memorable for you?
Well, sticking with Gullwings, if I may.
Sure.
I drove the W194 serial number 2. I think the serial number was literally 00002. So they made 10 cars in 1952, the first Gullwings, and that was a way, so the story with that is like, all right, they didn't have the money. It was 1952. The war ended in 45. So they didn't have the money to make a V8. So like everybody else was racing V8s at the time. They had a good 6-cylinder, and if they put mechanical fuel injection on it, they can make some power. So they could make it really like light and reliable, and they went with a space frame chassis. Well, couldn't do a door with a space frame, but they looked at the rules, and all it said was it had to have 2 hinges that opened the door. So they put them on the roof. Voila, the Gullwing was born. And the first of those, like the first, I think 7 they built 10 in 52. The first 7, just like it was really the window was hinged. Like you had to like step over the body, and then for the Le Mans start, they cut it down to the frame, so it was like a little bit of the body went up with the window. So I got to drive that. That was remarkably wonderful. That was like the coolest thing. And I've driven a number of Gullwings. I'm very lucky, and just 300 SL Roadsters, and those are, people. People always ask me, "Oh, you're into cars? What's your favorite car?" I always get that question. But eventually, after 5 minutes of hemming and hawing, I always come around. I either say the Countach or the 300 SL Gullwing, because I drove one on the Mille Miglia, and it was like the greatest car experience I've ever had, and one of the best cars I've ever driven. Like modern, I think I drove a 56, I think the one I drove, and it was awesome. Just ripping, roaring. We'd spend hours at 110, 120 miles an hour, no problem.
Who'd you do the Mille Miglia with?
Rob Moran, who's the head of communications for Mercedes-Benz USA.
Right.
So he was my. It was really generous of him, because I did about 3 days of driving, 1 day of navigating, and he did the reverse. So I got to really do the bulk of the driving, and it was awesome.
That's terrific.
And like the Mille Miglia. It's 2 million people in Italy stand on the streets and cheer for you as you break every single law they have in the country with a 25 motorcycle police escort. Literally in towns, they will smack the roofs of other cars to get them out of your way. And you just, as fast as you can drive.
Just bombing.
And people are just jumping up and down and screaming in the way only Italians can. They're so happy to see these cars going. And so
it's something I hope to have a chance to do one day.
Just put it that, like, that term bucket list, which is played out, it's kind of up there with Wheelhouse as far as like, but if you have a bucket list, put that at the very, very tip top, because there's nothing like it. There's no way it could happen in any other country the way it happens in Italy. And it's just, it's a career highlight milestone for me. Like it was the greatest. And the Gullwing was wonderful because it was the fastest car there. It's the most comfortable car there. And because I did it with Mercedes, I had an army of 50 engineers who, like, we'd pull in at night and be like, yeah, the alternator's kind of fritzing out and the brakes are weak. And we wake up in the morning, car's rebuilt. It was perfect. And, so it was unbelievable.
Yeah, I think they support their classics better than any other brand.
Oh, no one's even in second place.
Yeah.
And Porsche maybe, but not in the same way. I mean, it's, the Mercedes Classic Center is and you've been down to the one in Long Beach now,
right?
And Nate, like, one in a million. Like this guy, you know, is like
one of their shop guys.
He's their head mechanic.
Right.
Mike Kuntz runs the place. He's their chief mechanic, I believe, is his job title, or head mechanic. But like
young guy, super enthusiastic, incredibly knowledgeable, skilled.
He is literally made of enthusiasm. Only for Mercedes. He's funny because I talk to him and I'll say, "Oh, you know, I drove a Bentley." Like his eyes roll back in his head. Could care less. Anything Mercedes though, he is just on top of it. He's an encyclopedia with the dexterity to fix anything. Like he took Bossum and I through the Classic Center, gave us this like 2-hour tour, top of his head. We learned so much, and I've been to the Classic Center many times. Every time I go, it's like. Yeah, I'm with Nate. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. So yeah, the Mercedes Classic Center. Old car. Like I love old Italian stuff. Like I said, I'm a big Lamborghini fan. Like if I have any bias in this industry, is I kind of like Lamborghini.
Yeah.
You know? But you know, a little bit.
Johnny, has there been a classic that disappointed you?
Sure, yeah.
You had an expectation that was not fulfilled?
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, those W06s, the one I drove was like, you know, driving around on a $27 million thing that sucks to drive. It was really, like, okay, yes, there was a couple times when there was no traffic and there was no stop signs and you could just kind of go and you didn't have to change gears a lot. Like, oh, it was kind of fun, but like, you know, nerve-wracking. We had to go on the freeway at one point. Like, you know, the brakes don't even sort of work. Also, the brake pedal's on the right. The gas pedal's in the center. So, like, most of the time I remembered. One time I didn't for a split second. It was like, you know. And we found out a lot of the owners that were with us, they did a conversion to make the pedals proper.
Incredibly nerve-wracking.
Yeah, and it wasn't, you know, look, it's bigger than a truck. I mean, it's not great to drive. Lovely, wonderful, amazing car. Like, and it, you know, I shouldn't say anything bad about it, but you know, it wasn't the. I've driven cars of that era before, but not really with that power, and so you're really going, and they really didn't have brakes. You know, like even if you remembered where the brake pedal was, they didn't really do a lot. But, you know, they were just sort of like nice cars, whereas a Duesenberg was like, you know, if you're Clark Gable, you weren't buying a Mercedes, you were buying a Duesenberg.
Right.
You know what I mean? And, you know, Cadillacs were much more luxurious, you know, in the zeitgeist of the era, like, you know, a Cadillac, you know, standard of the world. Mercedes was a nice car. Yeah. But, like, you know, a Rolls-Royce was a nicer car. A Minerva was a much nicer car than a Rolls-Royce even, you know, so.
By the way, if you get a chance, drive a Rolls-Royce Silver Ghost. The most impressive thing about the Silver Ghost, it is the durability and reliability of those cars.
Yeah.
And those owners aren't afraid to take them on dirt roads and a 1,000-mile tour.
I mean, again, you know, Rolls-Royce making an SUV makes all the sense in the world because the Silver Ghost was effectively an SUV.
Yeah.
You know, that was Lawrence of Arabia was running around on a Silver Ghost.
Well, they had, during World War I, Rolls-Royce built armored cars.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were very truck-like, and they were indestructible. And, you know, all jokes aside, like, they were incredibly well built for the time, you know, for whatever reason. And, you know, but again, like, and I love brass era stuff, you know. So like I think it was Charles Rolls was a Minerva salesman. And he knew how good Minervas were. They're an obscure Belgian company. But at the time, they were ultra luxurious, didn't survive the Great Depression. But, like, you know, Rolls-Royce was trying to compete with Minerva. That was the standard, you know. So, anyways, those are legitimately wonderful cars. I would love. I've driven 50s Rolls. I've never driven I don't think I've driven a pre-war Rolls. I'd love to. I'd love to drive everything.
For a daily driver, for an everyman's car, what impresses you the most right now on the market?
I mean, you got to go with price points, right? So, you know, the Corolla can be had for under $40 if you have dealers that will sell you it for sticker price. And the GR Corolla, I don't want to say the Toyota Corolla, the GR Corolla. It's a very different animal than the regular Corolla. Super impressive. I think if you like cars, it's a very special vehicle. The Acura Integra Type S, specifically the Type S, is mind-blowingly good. That's actually given me pause where I'm like, do I really want the GR Corolla or do I want like this Acura? And it's, you know, it's probably $12,000 more. But that's all around just winner of an automobile. And you know, it's a lot like the Civic Type R. I just prefer the Integra more because I think Honda ran into this weird thing with the Civic Type R, where the last gen was, again, perfect as far as a performance vehicle goes. Well, we got to change something, make it stiffer. People like stiff cars, so you went from this like really wonderful everyday thing to, it's kind of stiff. Whereas with the Integra Type S, which is mechanically almost identical, it's softer.
If you were just a regular guy and you wanted to get into a classic and you wanted to bang for your buck.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. I mean, like, it's interesting right now. It seems like the used or the classic car market's tanking a little bit. The prices were out of control. I mean, people are paying $50,000 for like a 10-year-old Civic Si or whatever. I mean, it was insanity. I think that's gone. I hope that's gone. That should be gone. Like, let's say, like, what's, like a Camry, is a $40,000 car, right? So maybe 43 now. So let's say that kind of money. All right, well, what can you get for that kind of money? If you could get yourself into like a 912, I think maybe you could get a 912 for that kind of money. Boy, that's a delightful thing to drive. It's going to be a little worn for 40.
Mercedes SL.
Yeah, not a great driving experience. Terrific car, gorgeous, luxurious. They really, the 80s Mercedes, I don't think drive all that great. And those have shot up. I remember when you could get like the best one was like 11 grand, like not long ago, and now they're way more. And the thing with the SL, like all old Mercedes, is you got to, whatever you pay for it, you're going to immediately double that just getting it going because it's just expensive. They're just expensive things. You could get like Alfa Romeos, probably the $40,000 range. You look up like 70 GTVs, 70s era, 73, 75 GTVs, GTV6s. Those are really great cars. Yeah, they're going to need some sorting, but hey, those are nice. 914s are great. 911s get tricky because I remember a guy was selling one, and he's like, oh, go drive it. It was like 50,000. It was like a 911E maybe. I can't remember exactly what it was. T. And Magnus Walker hopped in the passenger seat with me, and I'm like, yeah. And he's like, mate, does this feel like a $50,000 driving experience? And I was like, no, it doesn't. It's kind of a tired car, and he had a good point. But it's just the sad part is these things just cost so much. Like I remember when I was getting the 914, Magnus again was like, mate, like, he's like, that's going to be $40,000 by the time you're done with it. That's what it's going to cost. And he's like, and then you're going to be up on Angeles Crest. It's going to be out of breath. You're going to go from fifth to fourth, and it's not going to go any faster because it has no torque, and you're going to be very sad, and you're going to want to put a 6-cylinder in it. And then that's going to cost you another 40. And he might be right. I still haven't driven the thing. So I don't know. Old Mercedes, I would say like a Corvette, like a C4, like a ZR1, mechanically bulletproof machines, 375 to 405 horsepower. Yes, the interiors are trash. They were trash from the factory, but like they drove great. That's a really cool car. That was late 80s. I think they went to like 93 with that. I can't remember exactly, but those are really good. First gen Viper, which is not by no definition is it a good car, but like, man, for 35 grand, that's a 400 horsepower V10. That's pretty cool. Like, you got to live here because it doesn't have a roof or door handles, but it's a pretty cool car. I'm just trying to think what else.
No, that's a good list.
Okay,
I mean,
cool.
there's some good stuff in there. By the way, Johnny, I have to commend you. You have been concentrating on your personal health lately.
Well, as I'm smoking a cigar, but yes.
And let's just address that because you were getting a little heavy. You were burning the candle at both ends.
I was just a fat ass. Let's be honest. I got back from the Goodwood revival, and I really, had been indulging like Pebble Beach, eating everything in sight. Now, and I got up to like 250, a little over 250 pounds, and I was just like, I felt fine. I've always, look, if I lose 30 pounds, I'd be 220 pounds, which some people think is heavy. But I felt great. I was just like, you look terrible. And I was just seeing like, pictures of myself because I'm on camera a lot and like, ugh, all right. I got a kid. And so, this guy on Instagram, Will Vargas, I'll plug him. He got in touch with me and he's like, hey man, like, this is what I do for a living. I specialize in training men over the age of 35 who travel for work. That's my business, and I'll help you out. Just like make a post. I think he wanted me to make like 2 posts on Instagram, and he waived the fee. And I was like, I'll do better than that for you. I'll post every week. It'll keep me honest. Like everybody's going to expect that every week I'm like, here's what I'm doing.
It's extra motivation.
Yeah, it keeps me on program, and I have a goal. I have a stupid goal, but it's a good goal for me. And I know this about myself. It's like if I have a goal, I can accomplish anything. If I don't have an assignment, I can watch YouTube for 96 hours straight and do nothing. You know what I mean? Yeah. I'm totally can be the laziest person on earth. So having a goal, and my goal is really dumb, but there's these things in Scotland called the Dinnie Stones. And I learned about them. There was a woman named Chloe Brennan. And I think at the time she weighed 140 pounds, and she picked them up. And combined the 2 stones they have metal ring handles. They weigh 733 pounds. So then I started reading about and watching videos about these Dinnie stones. And there's stones all over Scotland that are like traditional, like, whatever village you're from. The day you could lift the stone of the village, you were then a man. It was a rite of passage thing. And so the Dinnie stones are this set of stones. And to be able to even show up to attempt to lift them, you have to send the organizers a video of you deadlifting, I think it's 300 kilograms, so 660 pounds. And then you can try and again, you're not deadlifting, you're just picking them like an inch off the ground or whatever. Will I accomplish it? I don't know, but that's giving me the motivation. And, I started about a month ago, maybe 5 weeks ago, and I'm down 13 pounds, I want to say. But instead of just dieting, which I am doing, I'm really doing a lot of weight training. And the strength is coming back, and I'm throwing around. I have some 88-pound kettlebells, and those are moving again. Like when I wasn't working out, like it was really hard just even to move them, and now I'm actually doing things with them. So yeah, that's my goal. I don't know if I'm going to get there, but it'd be fun.
Well, I'm cheering for you.
Yeah, why not? Like, and it was cool if you lift the Dinnie stones, they write your name in a book, like lifted the Dinnie stones.
There you go.
Yeah,
immortalized.
Yeah. Why not?
Is there anything else you think we should cover?
Have we talked about watches?
We haven't talked about watches. No.
What are you wearing?
I'm just wearing a Seiko.
Hey.
Yeah.
I was wearing a Seiko yesterday.
Yeah, I love Seiko.
Me too.
They've got great styling. They're bulletproof.
Yeah, and they're kind of like
everyday watch.
They're kind of cooler than Rolexes. I hate to say it, but I really like them. Like I have 3 custom ones, and I have a tuna, Emperor tuna, and I love them. But this morning I put on, this is a Zinn. I don't know if you know Zinn, but German brand. Yeah, and they're sort of like the German G-Shock. So this one is the U1B. So blue dial, a very creative name. But it's like made of, not only is it made of submarine steel or U-boat stahl, as it says on the back, but it's tigemented. And so tigementing is you use some kind of electrolysis process where it hardens the steel. And so like a diamond is like 2,000 on whatever the hardness scale is. Steel is 200, but if you tigement it, it's 1,200.
Interesting.
So it's like basically scratch proof, probably would stop a bullet. And then I got it on this very cool Horus strap. I always plug Horus, my favorite watch straps. I'm super into it.
I like it. It's nice and chunky.
Yeah, it's huge. Yeah, 43 mil, weighs, I think with the metal bracelet, it weighs like 290 grams or something. So it's a big watch.
You're a big watch geek?
Yeah, I like to think so. I mean, I wish I knew more, but yeah. I love watches, and I could do 2 hours on watches if you want.
All right, Jonny Lieberman. You can catch him on Motortrend.com, and also the Inevitable podcast with co-host Ed Lowe.
Yeah, and that's on anywhere you get a podcast or on the Motortrend YouTube channel. And then I also am on Spike's Car Radio, and that is a comedy show, but it's ostensibly about cars.
Occasionally you talk about cars with Spike and Zuck.
Yeah, and if you don't know them, Spike Feresten, he was a writer for both Letterman and Seinfeld. Speaking of immortal, he was the guy who wrote the Soup Nazi episode of Seinfeld.
No soup for you.
Yeah, that was Spike. And Zuckerman's like 10 times funnier than him, and he's a banana peel lawyer, as he says. But he's also got one of the best car collections on planet Earth. Like the guy just buys the greatest cars, and a nice guy.
Paul is a very interesting cat.
He really is. Yeah. So,
Jonny, thanks for having me in. This was so much fun.
This was great.
Our cigars are down to stubs.
Yep.
So lots of fun.
Cool.
That's all for this episode of Horsepower Heritage. Follow, rate, and review the podcast. Check out the Instagram account and the YouTube channel, and be a patron of the show. Go to buymeacoffee.com/HP Heritage, and you can give as little as $2 or another amount of your choice. And a big thank you to those of you who've already donated. If you want to get in touch, just go to horsepowerheritage.com, click on the contact button there, and drop me a line. And I will see you back here on Wednesday, November 29th for more of the people and stories behind the machines. So until then, I'm Maurice Merrick. Thanks for listening.